So, I'm Sarwar Raza. Thank you guys for having me. I work in the Advanced Technology Group at HP Networking, which is the office of the CTO, and I'm nominally responsible for the SDN cloud work. And in my copious free time, I'm also the chair of the Northbound Interfaces Working Group in ONF. So, a couple of topics. I know he's teeing up the questions right now. So
I wish you luck.
I know. So there's there's a couple of topics I'd like to cover today, and I'm going to disappoint, unfortunately, our wireless friends. That's one topic I'm not going to touch on too much. However, we did make some wireless announcements. Feel free to go down to the booth and see what we've got. But in general, what I want to talk to you about today is one, I'd like to talk to you about northbound interfaces for SDN. I think it's an interesting topic. I've had a couple of very interesting discussions these days, with on panels at Open Daylight Summit, at ONS now, and really I'd just like to throw a perspective out there and see what you guys have to say and any questions you have. The other topic, very near and dear to my heart, because I'm responsible for it at HP Networking, is this whole notion of open source, right, and how it's invading our space, not just on the software side, but also the hardware side. So, OpenStack, Open Daylight, Open Compute, all of those things sort of fall under my remit, and I'm happy to talk about them, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion there. And last but not least, we'll talk a little bit about some of the SDN solutions we're showcasing at this show. Hopefully you've had a chance to see them. If not, we'll hopefully get into a little bit and whet your appetite. So with that, let me start with northbound interfaces. So I'll give you a little bit of history. There's a working group inside of ONF called the Architecture Working Group that spun up sort of a side project on northbound interfaces about a year ago, 2 years ago October, and they got to a point where they cataloged some use cases, figure out what who was doing what, and really the conclusion of it was there's about 18 different controllers out there with 18 different interfaces, and
only 18 interfaces.
Yes.
those are the ones we enumerated, right? And so a bunch of us who are active in ONF sort of petitioned the board and said, this probably requires a little more attention in terms of trying to simplify the lives of ISVs, app developers, and really this ecosystem we're trying to foster around SDN. It helps no one when a security vendor has to go code to has to pick between which controller to support, and it's not.
Isn't that just solvable with another layer of abstraction?
Well, so we're getting there, right? We're getting there, right? Layers upon layers, layers upon layers, right? How high can this layer cake go?
Yeah, layer all the way down.
But so what we ended up doing was really petitioning the board and saying this thing deserves deserves dedicated attention and a work group. And for my efforts lobbying them, I was rewarded with the task of getting the group started and getting to our first set of deliverables. So first thing I want to state up front, right? And this was actually, we try to make this as clear as possible. People seem to think that northbound interfaces, coming out of ONF, what we're working on is, a set of paper standards that we'll throw out there and say, hey, here's an interface, controller vendors go forth and implement, and app vendors go forth and consume. And that's actually completely not what we're doing. In fact, we are putting anything that smells like standardization sort of on the back burner right now, because with NBI, with the interfaces in particular, we feel like there's a need to be able to prove these things out with running implementations, And so what we're doing is we're starting with the use cases we already have, as well as contributions from existing members. We're up to almost 30 different use cases that people want to fit for some kind of, or rather, 30 different use cases that people want to try and fit into whatever framework we come up with for NBI. And we're going to start with sort of an information model, a data model. We're not looking to specify that this ought to be RESTful versus Java, right? We leave it to the implementation. But we do want this calendar year to be able to take a couple of those use cases and land concrete implementations of them, both in open source as well as in commercial vendors, so in commercial solutions. So where we are with that is we have selected, or we're close to finalizing the list of use cases that we're targeting for development this year. We're pretty confident that the open source platform we're going to write this on is going to be Open Daylight. And we can have a longer discussion about Daylight later. But it seems to be sort of the only game in town right now with respect to an open source controller that has forward momentum. The use cases themselves, we're looking at automating QoS use case that has come to us from a group of vendors. They call themselves UCIF, the Unified Communications Interoperability Forum. I don't know if you know them, but it's 30 or 40 vendors who are part of an alliance around unified communications, voice, video, messaging. And they have a real need to be able to make use of SDN-enabled infrastructures.
So when you talk about QoS, is it policing, marking, queuing, dropping, or is it traffic engineering?
Yes. Yeah. So it's actually you broke that up exactly right. It's everything but traffic engineering in phase one, and then traffic engineering is sort of a secondary use case.
Isn't OpenFlow like the worst possible tool to do the first four things?
Well, so I'm glad you bring that up, because even though we're doing this under the auspices of ONF, it's not tied to OpenFlow.
Yay! Finally.
Yeah, it's not tied to OpenFlow. So the idea is, if we do our jobs right, we're providing, I'm going to use that word again, the right level of abstraction that lets controller vendors be able to decide, what the right southbound mechanism is to achieve what you need to do, which could be OpenFlow, absolutely.
Hopefully not, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's So
effectively, you are creating an API which will reinvent RSVP, sort of.
For this particular use case, I think what it'll do is it'll amalgamate the requirements that the application needs to push into the network, right? And maybe that'll get translated into RSVP. But it's the same concept.
Model.
We're not reinventing anything here, right? We're just making it easier to consume, right? For this particular use case.
So you will say, okay, this application from this endpoints to those endpoints need this.
Exactly.
Which is what RSVP was supposed to be doing, but never did it correctly. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. So that's a that's a use case that we're actually fairly excited by. In fact, we have, if I take my ONF hat off for a second, we actually have a working implementation of this already with Microsoft. Our controller and Microsoft Link. We figured out how to do this, and we're now figuring out, or rather, we're now attempting to generalize the pattern to sort of not have it apply to just one application, just be able to apply to any UC application, any application that requires rich media services, any application that requires QoS. So that's one piece of the puzzle. The other the other part of this is we are we're also studying some of the other proposals in sort of open source land. So there's a proposal that a bunch of vendors are participating on, including ourselves, called group-based policy. you might have heard a little bit about it earlier today.
The most exciting projects in the ODL is group-based policy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And the people who are contributing it to are very exciting, so Plexi and TailF.
Yeah.
People who've got really innovative, sort of forward-looking views around that.
Yeah. So as part of our ONF work, we are so as chair, I've sort of directed the folks in my group to for me, sort of where it's legal, cut, copy, and paste are sort of the best tools available, right? To an engineer and a software, I'm a software engineer by training, and so we're not looking to reinvent the wheel. If the model there is applicable and can be generalized enough to fit the majority of the use cases we have, that's something that we're interested in, sort of, taking on the burden of the formal work around use cases, info modeling, and data modeling, the kind of thing ODL's not really going to do. Like, they like to push code. Nobody wants to get in their way. They don't want to have to publish reams and reams of documentation and
We've noticed that.
Yeah. So we're actually very actively involved there, both from an ONF perspective as well from an HP perspective, on trying to figure out if that's something that the industry can find consensus around.
When you say group policy, it can mean anything.
Yes.
So when you say about group policy use case, have you narrowed that down to some manageable chunk?
Well, so there are, in the best case, right, you would be able to apply the principles of group-based policy to most, if not all, of your use cases, right?
Yeah, but is it access list? Is it who can talk to whom? Or is it what bandwidth do I get from here to there? Or is it something else? Or is it all of the above plus something else?
So I think initially it starts with sort of the who can talk to whom, and with some sort of parameters and extensions built around that, and eventually you build on that top of that.
ACL distribution, sort of. So
yes, I think that's a good analogy.
That's pushed down as sort of apples.
Yes, not exactly an ACL, but I think that analogy holds.
It can be OpenFlow and
in
this case,
it
would really work well.
That analogy holds. So that's some of the work we're doing from a Northbound perspective. We have a shipping controller at HP, the VAN SDN controller, and we're fairly committed to as and when an industry common, I use the word common, not industry standard yet, but as and when an industry common sort of interface emerges, we'd love to be sort of at the forefront of that, because it ties in very well with our aspirations to create an ecosystem around this stuff, right? So we have we're providing a platform for our partners to be able to monetize their applications running on top of our controller right now. You can take a look at some of them in our booth right now, but the idea would be, wouldn't it be great if these applications could, with very little effort, be portable across different kinds of controllers. Now I know that's some of that is motherhood and apple pie, and it'll take a while before we get there. But that's the aspiration, and we actually have a very, very good set of committers and contributors from across the industry who are working on this, and fortuitously, you have sort of the same players in ONF as you do in Open Daylight, as you do in OpenStack for the most part. So we think this thing's coming together nicely, and hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have some concrete proof points of applications, commercial applications that are using these NBIs.
So you hope that this idea will not go down the same fruitless route as netconf/yang/netmod thing went, because you hope that there will be people contributing actual code and that will push the thing forward.
Yeah, and that's actually a very important point. From the perspective of, actual, landing actual implementations of this, right now, I'm in active recruitment mode, of ONF members, ODL people, to say, yes, this sounds like a good idea. Are you willing to back that up, with coding muscle, with architectural muscle? And so far, we have a couple of companies committed already to do this. So it's not an army yet, right? It's a small battalion that we're building, and as and when we continue to push into forums like OpenStack and Open Daylight, I'm hoping we can tap into some of the energy, some of the momentum there, and drag some of those people along as well. So yeah, we're hoping. We definitely don't want this to be a, look, this is all this great technology, we're going to put it out there, here's a standard, and poof, no one ponies up the resources to actually go and implement it. So we're sticking our neck out, HP sticking its neck out and saying, we'll do our part, but we certainly can't do it alone.
So when you were talking about the group policy stuff, and it looks like it will be Eccles++ in the first release. How is that different from OpenStack security groups, and why wouldn't you just reuse that?
Well, for one, you have to think beyond OpenStack as the orchestration platform and whatnot.
I mean, just
yeah.
the data model or something.
Yeah. So, I love OpenStack. I've been involved with OpenStack for several years now. I do think that there are some fundamental issues with some of the choices that have been made with respect to the networking framework. And if anything, I think even though the intent was good and the intent was noble, what you ended up with was, I'm trying to remember, at last count, there's 150 contributors on Neutron, right? Yet I would say 90% of those contributions go into proprietary plugins and not the framework,
Yes.
right? Which is
tells you a lot.
Which is a bit of a problem.
Yeah.